All right, we're trying something new here. We're going to do a Moto Metrics stat review. And we got the team here that puts together the Moto Metrics every week. That's Arich. He's the statistician, digging deep into all the live timing and other data that comes out of the races every weekend. We got Brandon, who covers marketing, but has a big role in publishing the content that we produce every week. And then myself, I've been doing the vision assets and a little bit helping out on all the other tasks. So this is the team that puts together the Moto Metrics every week. We're covering Tampa. This is our first time just doing a little stat review. This is not a podcast. We're just doing a stat review, and we want to talk through some of the metrics. So let's start. Arich, you're the deepest in on all these metrics. Can you cover the highlights for us, and let's get going?
Yeah. Before we dive into any of this, so I want to say that this is all live timing data and not personal rider data that uses LITPro. So this is all just scrubbed from the live timing website. When we dive into highlights here, can you scroll down? Yeah. When I try to highlight what happened in the race, most of us watch the race, so we see who did well, who didn't. So I do highlight the race winners every now and then, but I also try to pick out some details from some privateers, things like that. So just jumping into things, of course, we got to talk about Malcolm Stewart right away. He was pretty much unstoppable, particularly in the whoops section. I think out of the 23 times they went through the whoops, he set the fastest time 17 times, was half a second faster than everyone else, full second faster than many other riders, like 65% of the class. He was a second faster in the whoops through. So yeah, he was dominant, and Chase finally got a start. He got out to the lead and just couldn't hold it together in the whoops, and it ended up costing him. He ended up going down on lap 18 and wasn't able to rebound from that. Another big storyline this week was Ken Roczen got tied up with some lappers. There's lots of commentary going on right now in the moto world on that, but he was doing really well. We know Roczen has great whoop speed. He wasn't quite as fast as Stewart, but he was much faster on the rest of the track and was leading the field when you look at average lap times by almost a quarter second per lap until he went down. I know that was very early in the race. A lot happened after that, but he was primed for at least a podium, if not a race win. On the 250 side of the house, we saw some great things out of Max Anstie. He did, get the race win. Unfortunately, we saw Pierce Brown go down, and we're wishing him the best of recovery there. But Max was almost matching Malcolm in the whoops. He was like 0.1, 0.2 seconds off in the whoops compared to Malcolm. It also won him the race. Dax Bennett was faster everywhere else around the track, but beat Anstie beat him in the whoops. And then want to give a huge shout out to Cullen Park, tied his career best, but also topped our LITPro consistency on a very difficult track. He was 97 for his consistency score, just kind of absolutely insane. You look at other top guys, and there was nowhere even close to the 90s for a lot of riders, and he was just out there killing it. Yeah,
probably the metrics, the consistency metrics were probably the most interesting to me, because some people were taking big swings through the sand section, which was maybe the most treacherous, and I found that really interesting. So we'll get into that, but before we do that, maybe since this is our first time, let's describe. So here's the whoop section, but what Arich's done is color-coded all these different sections to highlight the rider selection, the rider who got the fastest average time. So I think that would be a good thing to cover right now, is this graphic, which we're posting on Instagram, which we're posting on Twitter, and is in the blog, is different than some of the other ones you see. And I think the primary difference is just that we're showing the fastest average. And why do we show fastest average instead of fastest overall?
Yeah, I mean, fastest average, there's a little bit better way to see which riders adapt to the track over the entire main event, especially something like the sand, right? If one rider got a really clean line through at one time, they could be significantly faster, but if they weren't able to replicate that lap after lap, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it still matters that they were able to put a clean line through, but you have a guy like McAdoo in the sand, for example, that was able to double into it with that torn ACL, and that gave him a clear advantage. You saw it in the heat race, you saw it in the main event, That alone probably landed him on the podium. Another reason why we do it, for example, like in the 450 class, if you want to scroll up to that track map. Sorry, I'm making you go all over the place, but in the 450s, that rhythm there on the left lane where Sexton was the fastest, S6 there, the fastest time was set by Justin Hill, but this also kind of highlights which riders were in the front of the pack, right? Hill had a great race, but Sexton was a race contender, and it shows because he was the average fastest through that sector.
So the other one, so did you guys listen to any of the race interviews? Because they were pretty interesting this time. I don't know if you guys caught some of that.
Mm-hmm. I did. Definitely a lot with lappers.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up something. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is the topic. I'm going to bring up something that kind of doesn't relate exactly to this race, but raised a lot of questions in my head. Is Webb in the interview said that he started blitzing, and why he started blitzing whoops. He said he got together with his team, his dad. He said that like in other races, jumping through the whoops he's not going to win races if he's not jumping. So he said the risk versus reward made sense that, he's going to choose to blitz from here on out. We've done this before. If you think back to San Diego, Webb had the fastest time jumping through the whoops in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not Tampa, but it's related because he brought that up. He's making a decision to go through, but he was the fastest overall average time through the whoops. Am I right about that?
In San Diego, yeah, he was. But I think a big difference here was San Diego was just a 9-pack. This was 10 plus a starter. So they would either have to do like a triple quad or double, which I think at that point jumping would be slower than skimming.
So I don't know. I kind of felt what Webb was saying is that it's a decision him and the team made. He's going to start blitzing whoops. And I just want to see that play out over the next few rounds and see if that's, especially when you come right out of a corner and enter the whoops. That's where I think he's going to go back to jumping. And I'll be surprised if he's blitzing, especially when I think that he does know how to jump through the whoops faster.
Yeah. And this week it actually worked for him. He was, I believe, third fastest on average through the whoops. That's removing Roxon because he only raced like 7 laps, and it's hard to compare Roxon's whoop speeds when you look at averages. But yeah, Webb was like third, fourth fastest in the whoop splitzing through.
Yeah, well, we got I think that sand section is that ties into consistency throughout the race. There's some cool metrics on that. Let's talk about those. But I think the sand section is going to be a fun one to look at, Webb, and we have some of that on Vision that we'll jump to in a second. So anything else that we want to bring up looking at Moto metrics and graphics that we have for this race? Go ahead, because I got another.
That lap time breakdown, those might be a little difficult to read. Basically, I just bin up where each lap time took by the whole second, so you can kind of see a distribution there. This saddle shape is really interesting, something we don't see very often. And what this shows is that the front peak is all your.
Let's go. Saddle shape is this what you're talking about? Yeah.
And how there's that dip there, that front peak. Yeah.
Saddle shape. Let's talk about. This is statistical. This is talking stats, and I think this is going to be. This is what makes it fun. So we're going to get a little bit nerdy on this, but I think that's where we want to go, and it'll be enjoyable. But I don't think anybody's probably heard saddle shape. So go over that, but let's start over again.
Yeah, of course. So if you're familiar with reading through these or just stat distributions in general, normally you see a bell curve, right? I feel like most people are familiar with the bell curve.
That's where you get graph that looks like that.
Yeah, you get some that are very quick, some that are very slow, but most all around the same time. In racing, we often see a skew, so that left side of the graph often has a larger peak because you have a lot more elite riders, and then it's kind of tapers off. And here we have this saddle shape, which is really interesting because this shows we have kind of 2 groups of riders in this race. Those that were able to execute particularly the sand, every single lap, and those that had some mistakes and struggled. And so there's really kind of two groups of riders, those in that 55, 57 second range, and those in that 60+ second range. And I think that's why we saw so many lappers. Getting back to Brandon's point on lappers, we saw the most lappers we've seen all year at this race. And I think that the lap time chart shows that.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's yeah, maybe let's just go through so let's just talk about high level, how to read the different stats, and let's just start at the top. This might be a good exercise for the first time. We got our really cool, oh, we got some stuff showing up. Really cool metrics.
Maybe before you do that, just to complete the thought, let's look at the 250 graph.
Oh yeah, okay.
Just in comparison.
Yeah, the 250 graph looks much more traditional, right? It's kind of got it's skewed right, but they're more clustered together. This 250 East group is a lot of veteran riders. Pointed this out in the article. For the first time this year, the 250 riders as a whole had a higher consistency average than the 450 riders, something we didn't see at all with the West Coast. And I think that just comes down to the experience that this group has, right? There's Anstey, McAdoo, Hampshire, Kitchen, all these different guys that there's like, I think they said like 9 or 10 different race winners in this class. So lots of very fast guys, lots of guys that were able to put it together. And unfortunately, you know, there was some mishaps for a few of them, but the lap time distribution looks way different than that 450 class. And the 250s didn't have the lapper problem either.
That's
Yeah, they also had a red flag, right, which kind of reset the race halfway through. And so everyone that was a lap down basically got put at the very tail end of the leaders, which helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so do you think the red flag, it becomes like kind of an energy efficiency kind of thing? Like you get a little bit of a pause mid-race, so you kind of get to re-energize and put in another sprint to kind of finish the race?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, when they started the race, they obviously didn't know that was going to happen. But when the red flag happened, that was almost like halfway exactly in the race. And so, and then the red flag ended up lasting longer than either half of the race they raced, right? It was like 8 minutes of racing, 12-minute pause, 8 minutes of racing. So for sure, I think that red flag contributed to these lap times being more clustered because everyone kind of got a fresh start.
I think I felt super bad for Pierce Brown. Like he had such a good lead, and then that red flag set him back.
He looks really good on the start bike.
So Brandon, let's ask you this question. How do you say this word right here?
McAdoo?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I said McAdoo, didn't I?
McAdoo. You said it twice now. I thought it was McAdoo, but
no, right. It is McAdoo. I pronounce it wrong, I guess.
Is it missing an A here? Could be, right? Or is it actually?
No, it's
McAdoo.
MC, I think. Yeah, just MC.
What do you think was it about these whoops that were so treacherous?
Yeah, this is the second time this year where we've seen a jumping section before the whoops. Last week at Glendale was the first time. This is the second time. Every other race has been a bull corner, whoops, and then a bull corner. And outside of this race, all of them have also been sets of 9, except Glendale and now this week. So I think two things contributed to the whoops being a huge contributing factor. First, we saw a variation in entrance speed, and we can see this in the vision asset when we get there. Riders could either single in, take the inside single in, and then double, and then go through the whoops.
Yeah, that was like jump, land here, take the corner, jump out, double, that.
Yep. And then the other option was take the outside, double, triple. That double, triple option let riders enter the whoops way faster. And so I think that allowed them to carry their momentum. And then we have to talk about dirt quality. This track got really rutted. It broke down pretty easily. And so I think a lot of these whoops got pretty broke down compared to the West Coast races. And so we ended up seeing a separation there with riders that could ride the broken down whoops versus those that needed to slow down to either jump through them or skim them at a slower pace.
Yeah, I would agree. It seemed like there was a lot of loose dirt on the faces and wheel spin. You know, having a longer whoop section led to potential for a wheel spin later.
Yeah, I think this is not, you know, nothing to do with data, but I recall seeing or hearing or reading something that the whoops for this race were not as tall as normal whoops, but they were spaced out further. And I think that probably threw off some guys because typically with a supercross track, everything's kind of built to spec. And so that's why they can go out on press day on lap 1 and huck a quad because they know exactly how far it is, how much speed they need and all that. And the whoops were they were built different.
Yeah. I kind of got the sense from one of the interviews, the Max Anstey interview, post-race interview, that it was, he was kind of glad. He seemed relieved almost that nobody was really pressing him in the whoops because he just wanted to, you know, kind of end the night safe, and a lot of, like, it was treacherous. And Daxton Bennick and Faulkner, who were behind, or not Faulkner, but McAdoo, who were behind him, weren't like ultra charging through that section. I can't remember the exact word he used. Yes, it's interesting though. It seems to me like if you can enter the whoops at a higher like starting speed, then your chances of skimming through them would be higher. But you know, I'm not a rider, so I shouldn't comment on that so much. I just thought that would make it slightly easier to just carry a straight line through the whoops.
Yeah, but it could bite you easier. I think that's what we saw with Pierce Brown there.
Like you get the speed already, you get up on top, and you can go straighter. I even think I've heard riders comment on that benefit. But
yeah, Malcolm, you could really see his commitment early in the entry, and he always just looked so straight. You know, no swapping, no. It was really all of his looked very straight.
Yeah, the whoops are one of those sections where more speed is always better, and a lot of the time when guys like start swapping and things like that, they'll let off the throttle, and then that just makes the mistake worse. And this is just an area of the track where you have to give it more speed and more throttle, and it most often will work out for you better.
Scary. All right, let's chat. Let's talk about this stat. Just walk us through how this graphic works.
Yeah, so I just take Sexton and Stewart's lap time and then compare the difference between the two. So these are just time lapse.
Below means
Sexton had an advantage over Stewart, and then above means that Stewart had the advantage over Sexton. And so even though Sexton grabbed the whole shot and he was out to like 7-second lead on Stewart in that first half a lap or whatever, Stewart was catching Sexton no matter what. And it was just a matter of time. You could see the laps where Sexton had an advantage, those smaller orange bars. They don't even compare in the look at lap 9 and 10 there. Before Sexton went down, Stewart, when he was faster, was gaining a second plus on Chase. And on the flip side,
the one he went down on.
Yeah, that's where he went down.
And so he went down on this lap and did not pick it up until back to here or so.
Yeah, and unfortunately they didn't interview him.
Malcolm might have slowed down too, right?
Yeah, no, if you look at the times, I was also looking at Malcolm and Cooper Webb's timing, and same sort of thing happened here, but Cooper ended up being faster those last couple of laps than Stewart, but Malcolm was so far out in the lead. I think that he didn't need to push it. I mean, you saw it on that last lap in the broadcast. He was just having a good time out there. He didn't even blitz the whoops on the last lap. He just, kind of jumped through them, played it safe. I think he was just focused on getting home and getting that race win.
Yeah, this is a real, this is probably Sexton. That's just a lot of time lost, and it's probably all in the whoops.
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't interview him, right? So, and we don't really know what happened there, unfortunately. So I don't know if it was.
Oh, he said No, he said he damaged his throttle and brake lever.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, the brake lever was hitting the throttle housing is I think what I saw.
Yeah, I didn't see anything on that.
Yeah. Okay. Any other graphs or anything that we should describe? Yeah, consistency score by segment. Let's talk about that in a second, but let's pull up the vision asset and then talk about it there, I think. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. Got to switch screens 1 second.
Yeah. So with this vision asset, this was filmed during qualifying.
Correct.
Track was obviously in a lot different state. And so we might see Malcolm not being the fastest guy in the whoops. Things change as the night develops. And obviously we all saw it on the broadcast, how much speed Malcolm had in the whoops.
All right. Yeah, totally. So that is what we're going to find.
So do we know which qualifying session this is from? Second?
No, I have the time of day, but I didn't go in and look at what time of day match it up with the qualifying session. So we know the time. We could probably match it to the actual lap and see what it was. But so we had some really good laps between Malcolm and Roczen, and I was initially thinking that would be the thing to highlight here because it was I don't know, such a momentous night for the both of them. And Roczen had tried an outside, okay, let's get a little context here. So this is the portion of the track we're looking at. On the bottom here is Webb. On the top here is Malcolm. So I'll just kind of scroll through real quick. Different lines through this section, and we'll zoom in a second and look at it. But they both go outside. This is what I probably thought was the most interesting and why I picked this one. They both go outside in this section, and through here they take the same line. And
and that double triple there was what I was talking about earlier, where as the race developed in the main event, a lot of guys were doing single double. I don't know if they just felt it was safer, but it wasn't faster. And Malcolm continued to double triple, and that's where you got that whoop speed.
Yeah, so backing up, sorry, wrong button. Backing
Really
up,
good entry speed from that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Like, and we can show Roczen coming inside. We could show that right now if we wanted. But why would they be? I wonder why. You got any thought? Like, what do you think, Brandon? Like, why did they go? Why was Malcolm the only one? Did they just not want that extra speed coming in the whoops?
Maybe extra speed, or just it's more track, so you're adding track right on the.
Yeah, I think there's this really bad misconception that outside lines are slow in our sport. You see it. I like to go back to Ryan Villapoto back when he first started racing in the outdoors. I swear that kid would take the outside line on every single corner and then set like a lap time 6 seconds faster than the next guy. So sometimes it's about maintaining that high speed. In this instance, they needed the outside to hit the double triple, which I think they weren't. For the guys that were doing single double, I don't know if they were not thinking that far down the road, not realizing how much of a speed difference that was for entering the whoops, or like I said earlier, it might have been a safety or comfort thing. If you go back to the first double, that's a pretty large step up that they have to do coming out of that corner. And so maybe they didn't want to risk, going over the bars there, having to stretch out for that triple or whatever. They could probably do it more consistently, just doing single double. That's just my two cents on it.
Yeah.
Maybe wheel spin on the first jump.
I feel like I saw it all night. Honestly, was just jumping to the inside, going inside. Maybe it's the because you could take a different line. I mean, look how different their lines are through this section. To end up so
I was just gonna say, is it a 3-footer over a 5-footer? I think the first jump's like a 3-footer, right? And then they're going over a 5-footer.
Looks like
entering the whoops. Or,
Yeah, entering the whoops.
yeah, I think so.
Well, let's break down time. So they both leave this jump face at the same time. So they're equal. Webb on the bottom there takes a higher line and goes for this triple, right? Malcolm stays lower. He takes this different line. Then they both end up. Oh, no. Yeah, so Malcolm is landing, doubling out, and Webb is going to single out.
Yeah, Malcolm took the preferred race line that they did in the main event.
Yeah,
But
so
Webb
that's
is faster by 0.2.
I think that's where the speed loss there from having to single that last one and versus Malcolm just being able to carry the momentum, doubling out, is really probably what informs this next double.
Well,
Just
okay.
being able to carry more speed through the corner and into that double and then over into the whoop section.
Well, they're pretty equal to this point here. So they, based on where they enter, so they both kind of come into this corner and reach the apex of the corner at around 0.2 seconds. They get to this jump face at 0.22. Actually, let's take a moment to describe this thing, because this is always a point of confusion. Is everybody's like, the bikes are in exactly the same position. Why is the faster by 0.22? So this is what we're doing here. We're intentionally syncing the video up so that you see the rider in the same position every time. So we're just going to cover that a few times, probably every time we do this, until it's well known what we're doing. We want to make it as comparable as possible. So this is what it looks like when they're out of sync. And so you see riders are like getting to different sections at the same time. Still, it's only 0.22 seconds, but they're still like arriving at, so Webb's on the ground, Malcolm's still in the air. That's what that means. I'm going to turn it back on to sync composition.
It's pretty wild to see, though, that 0.2 of a second is the equivalent of, say, a bike length or, bike length and a half.
Yeah. All right, so they come into this section, and look at Webb skimming next to the tough blocks. That's to get out of those cupped out whoops, but you got to keep like a 6-inch line, basically.
Yeah, and I mean that's what ended up biting Pierce Brown, right? As his front fork caught a tough block and it threw him over the bars.
Yeah, he was. Let's see, is this gonna work? Still don't know. I have this ability to draw on there. Oh yeah, there we go. He was on that side anyways. Not a very good.
Yeah, and this, what's crazy to me is when we watched Malcolm go through the whoops in the main event, it's like he was straight as an arrow. But in this vision asset we got, his back end is all over the place. And so I think that's either a good example of him either not hitting them as fast as he did in the main event, or them going back and making bike changes for the main event or the whole night show. Probably both.
Yeah, wheel spin. That's probably halfway down that section. I'll bet they start to get some wheel spin. They just lose drive, and then you start to see, the front end drop in a little bit more, especially with Webb, I think, in that clip.
Yeah, well, Webb does lose a little bit of time to Malcolm here. By the point when he started the whoops, he was at 0.22 faster, and now he's 0.2. So he just loses a tiny bit of speed. And then they both take a kind of pretty high line, but you can see Webb rounds it out a lot more than Malcolm does.
Yeah, and I think they needed to go up that high to get as much speed entering the sand as possible.
Yeah, because just look how Webb does this section. He was one of the few who was just getting all the way over that.
Yeah, and that's what McAdoo was doing in the 250s, and I think he was the only 250 rider to consistently do that.
Yeah,
it really did. It looked considerably faster too.
Yeah, and if you look at this section from the other angle, like head on, like it's just sand whoops going up the jump faces. It's just such a scary sight to see as a rider. So I don't
we
know.
say there's no more dragon backs, but I think they made their own.
Yeah, like landing in a whoop on a jump phase versus jumping all the way over it, and just I don't know, man. That's crazy what these guys are doing. But okay, let's talk about consistency now, because Webb goes back to gaining time right here, and we had Arich has some interesting stats on Webb's consistency through the sand. Like, let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so if you just take Webb's every lap he did through the sand in the main event, he was the fastest in the sand, but he wasn't that consistent. So he had a few slow times through. And if we can take the consistency scoring you see in like the app after you log sometimes and narrow it down to an individual section. And the sand was by far the what we'd like to call the most difficult section that we've seen all year. Very low consistency scores, and Webb was right around the average. It was like a 60 for consistency in the sand, which shows that this section had so much variance every single lap. We saw where Malcolm was able to make a bunch of time in the main event in the whoops, but the sand ended up having a bigger impact on total lap time.
Well, so let's go back through it. So he had the fastest time through the whoops. Sorry, the sand.
Yeah, Webb was fastest in the sand.
He had the fastest average time through the sand.
Yep.
But he also had like a few misses. He had
he had a few misses.
He had like maybe the fifth most consistent, which means he had some kind of hit some big misses in there.
Yeah, I mean he went through the sand, 3 feet in front of Roxon when he went down. So I'm not sure if he got caught up in that. I'm sure a few times through passing lappers slowed him down too. The sand was really an area I think you had to be very careful with lappers. I mean, we saw that with Roxon. So that probably led a lot to the inconsistency, but also just every time you went around the track, it was different. I bet I don't know if those ruts stayed in the same spot more than a few laps at a time.
Yeah, this part as a rider, this part is just crazy to me. It's like what Webb was willing to do in this race. Like that set him apart from almost everybody else, because he was willing to like give it a go every time. And a lot of people looked to me like they were just, I'm going to take a line I can do every time that's more safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's impressive. That's crazy too. Anyways, any other, like, should we cover anything else? Like, is this a good stat review?
Yeah. I don't have anything to add.
Let's call it.
If you like this kind of stuff, make sure you're following us on Instagram and Twitter. And if you really like it, got the full article every week, and you can go back and revisit old races too.
Yeah, check it out. These are every week we're doing Moto metrics, and Arich's the writer on that. So check out that content. It's really good. Thanks, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.